All right, this is Rosina, and I'm here again with Matt, Director of Champions Network. And Matt, what I would love today is for you to talk about the profile of a champion. Somebody might be watching this training and asking themselves, am I really the right person for this job? What are the attributes of a champion? Um, I look behind you and I see, I remember when we first did the first interview, I was like, what is that behind your head? Like, I didn't know what that was on your wall. So I'd love for you to tell people what that is in the frame and what you kind of bring to this and why you're an ideal champion and one that people can actually look up to because they see different attributes in your walk that you could even help possibly disciple them into if they don't already have those attributes.
Yeah, well, so behind me, that's all my military awards and ribbons and commendations and things like that. I was a former U.S. Army paratrooper and Iraq War veteran, and that's actually where all my addictions stemmed from was injuries that I incurred while being in combat, and also back in the United States, training to go back to combat. So I was blown up 3 times over in Iraq from roadside bombs. And I was injured in a parachuting accident back in Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And I fell approximately 2,000 feet from an airplane and had a double parachute malfunction and hit my back. Mm. Obviously, I'm lucky to be alive from that. But that started me down a road of prescription painkillers. I really didn't know what addiction was at that point. But I was taking the pills because it made me feel better and I could still go out and operate the way I was before. And that just led to, after I got out of the military, it led down a road of drugs and it led down a road of more than just that. But I was an angry person and I had so much more going on inside. There was just a struggle going on every day and just a void in my life that I was trying to fill with drugs that it just didn't work. And so going through a few years of an addiction, and then, God saw fit to deliver me from that and really deliver me from everything that was oppressing me and everything that was holding me back. And then he even added more good things to that. Instead of just taking things away, he filled those voids of those things that I was trying to fill myself. And I really feel like after he did that for me, he's called me to do this. He's called me to give back. He's given me a heart for people, a love for people, which I didn't have before. To be honest with you, I used to hate people. I really did. I couldn't care less what your problem was or what you were going through because it was poor me, but he's really given me a heart for people. He's given me a heart for the addicted because I've been there and I've done that and I know how it feels and I've been in those situations. And I don't want anybody to go through that. I really don't. And, I feel like one of the worst sayings that people have out there is, well, that person just has to hit rock bottom first. I completely disagree with that. We want to help you before you get to that point. So you can be successful, so you can have joy and peace in your life. And those things only come from God. That's it. You can't fill them with anything else. So I really believe that I've been called to do this. We've all been called to do something. If we've been redeemed, we've been called to do something. And this is just what God has called me to do. And I've said yes. There's still a point where he's called us all to do something, but we have to agree to do it. We have to have the courage to walk forward and to see this thing through. And I think really that's what has brought me to sitting here today talking to you about this thing.
That's so good. So obviously being in the airborne, you have a lot of discipline, right?
Yeah,
So
I do.
Do you see that as a carryover of something that would be a profile attribute that a champion should have?
Yeah, I definitely do. And now that also goes both ways because I've been forced to loosen up a little bit too, where I felt like I was maybe a little too, not necessarily uptight, but regimented and structured.
Yes.
That is an aspect of me letting go of control. of some things, because ultimately it's not my group, it's God's group, and it has to go and flow the way that He wants it to. I'm just there as a vessel for Him to work through. But it is very important, though, for the champion to be disciplined,
Right.
because when we're out running the streets and doing these things that we're not supposed to do, there's no discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to come back, in order for us to be the people that God has called us to be. It has to come back in order for us to be contributing members to our churches and to our communities and to society. We can't just be running around with no rules. And when we're out running the streets like that, there are no rules. The only rule is get what you need to survive. And once we get past that all-consuming rule of this is what I need for today, it's time to start focusing on the small things, showing up to places on time, not interrupting people, being respectful to other people. Those are all small disciplines that build up into something larger that I really have found that it really builds a lot of character, and it allows people to start seeing changes in you that they've never seen before, or they might not even recognize you. Is this the same person that I was talking to 6 months ago? I've gotten that so many times from my guys that, man, my parents don't even recognize me. They say this isn't even my son, but it's in a good way.
Yeah.
And so it's all those small disciplines that build up and create character, and really create accountability. And it's just been awesome to see that instilled in my guys as well.
So then, based on that, what type of spiritual leader would it take to really be a champion and to do a champion group well?
Yeah. Well, like I said before, you have to have a heart for people. You have to have a heart for the addicted, and you have to have a heart for training and discipleship. Our thing is we want to equip these people that are coming to our group.
Right.
We want to equip them so that in turn they are able to empower the church and the community around them. Because there are so many people out there that could make such an impact that aren't being used because A, they might not understand that they can be used, and B, they don't know what they can be used for. So that's up to us to really channel that and to help that person grow, because I believe the only way we're gonna attack this and beat this drug epidemic is if everybody steps into the role that they were created for, and to really go forward with a boldness. And it's all about equipping people. It's all about empowering and discipleship. And so definitely the champion has to have a heart for people, and to be able to train and to be able to instill those disciplines into people to go forward.
So let's say somebody, I'll kind of play devil's advocate here. So let's say somebody wants to be a champion, but they don't even have their own spiritual disciplines down. So maybe they're an addict, they've been in recovery, they've come to Christ, and they think this is a great idea. But what's going to happen if that person isn't building themselves up in the Lord, isn't studying the Bible, isn't praying? Really, what are you looking for in the profile? And what does your spiritual walk look like? And how can you motivate other people to emulate your practices, your private practices?
Yeah. Well, if you want to be a champion and you really don't have much of a spiritual life, it's just not going to work. Just plain and simple. So you have two options. You can either forget about it, or you can buckle down spiritually and walk into that being a champion. But there is really a point, and I tell my guys this very often, that you have to be ready to start giving back to other people. You have to be comfortable and in a certain point in your recovery and also in your walk with Christ to really feel confident enough to take on other people's problems, because that's a big burden to carry. So the champion is going to be somebody that has to be very, very grounded spiritually in order to be able to support all that weight that you're going to be taking on. And so I've seen it time and time again where, somebody is, say, clean for 3 months and they want to go out and change the world, which is a great attitude to have. but I've seen it so often to where they go out and it's so easy to get tangled up and wrapped back up into other people's problems that they'll just get dragged down right back with them. And it just causes you to have to start all over again, which is okay, to start all over again and to get back up. But we're trying to avoid that. And so the person, the champion that's going to be leading these groups has to be grounded and strong spiritually, because there's going to be times where it's tiring. There's going to be times where it's taxing. There's going to be times where you want to cry and scream. But man, it's so worth it. You know, there's going to be times where you feel like you can't do it anymore. And that's when God comes alongside of you and says, man, you probably can't do it, but I can. Right. So just come with me. I'll take you through it. And so prayer, I mean, you have to be grounded in your own prayer life. You have to pray for your champions group. You have to pray for yourself, for your men, for the families of these men. Prayer works. And you're going to be teaching people how to pray. And so it's important, obviously, that you know how to pray, that you know how to teach somebody to pray. And also you have to be in the Word every single day, because what I've found is that the only true wisdom and the only true growth comes from the Word of God. That's it. And oftentimes, there's been some studies done that the minute that a person enters into active addiction, whether they're 19 years old, their maturity level stops right there. So even if they've been using for 5, 6, 7 years, by the time they're 25, they still have the mind of a 19-year-old. So oftentimes what happens is those drugs and stuff are taken away. Their mind has to get built back up. And the only true maturity comes from the Word of God. That's it. And I've seen that with a lot of my guys, to where, they're like, man, I just can't get over being a joker, joking around and not taking things seriously. And I say, read God's Word, because everything you need to mature is in there. And I found that true in my life as well.
That's really good. So, who is the champion accountable to? Obviously, the champion is accountable to his group. Do you also meet with your pastor? Who do you have as a confessor to support you as you're in the leadership role to these guys?
Yeah, I do. I do meet with my pastor. And at the beginning of this thing, I really made it a point to surround myself with good, strong Christian men. And there are a few women as well. But what that does is it allows me to lean on them. You can't do this thing on your own. And I've really found some good, some of the elders of the church that have had experience with leading people and leading groups and things like that, to get advice from, or just to confide in. But I do make it a point to meet with my pastor at the very least once a month. We try to meet every couple weeks, just for me to be able to tell him what's going on, and for him to be able to support me in any way. And it's good for me as the champion to be able to talk about some of the things that are going on, all the while keeping anonymity and things like that. But I meet with my pastor, and he asked me just flat out, what can I do to serve you better? And that's been incredible to have that type of relationship with my pastor, whom I look to as a mentor, and I love him, and I've learned so much from him. And that dynamic is important, because we do need support. Now it doesn't take much for the pastors to have the group going on. Really all he's had to do is provide a space and a time. And what I've done also is make sure that this thing is bathed and covered in prayer. So we have a team at the church that specifically just prays for the champions group. And what I like to do is I like to update those people, the ones that are praying for us, as to what's going on. If somebody gets saved in the group, I want them to know about it. I want them to see what they're praying for and to know that it's working. And what I found is that it invigorates the entire church. God uses that, and he makes it all work together to bring that spirit together of, hey, man, this is what's going on. This is what you're praying for, and this is what's working. And so that's been an incredible dynamic of this whole thing.
That's great. So So far, we've talked about today, you really need a spiritual leader. You need to be a spiritual leader if you're a champion. You also have to exercise humility to be accountable to your pastor or to a team. Another thing you talked about that I thought was really interesting is you said you rarely talk about drugs after the first few weeks. And that's because people come with so many different addictions. And so I think what you were trying to say is that another profile characteristic would be that the champion needs to be educated on multiple addictive behaviors, not just drugs. Was I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I think what I've found so often is that the addiction portion, the drugs and alcohol and the pornography and all that stuff, that's what initially brings us together. Now, for me, it does whatever it takes to bring us together. That doesn't matter. But it's just something that we all have in common. That's something that we have struggled with in the past or are currently struggling with. Mm-hmm. But for us, the group is about Jesus Christ. It's not about drugs. It's not about alcohol or pornography. It's about Jesus. So what Jesus does constantly, if you look in the Bible, he's constantly meeting people on common ground. That's where he meets people. He goes to them on common ground, and then he preaches his message, right? So we want to bring people together on common ground, and if that common ground is drugs and alcohol or pornography, that's what it is. And so, my whole vision for this thing from the very beginning is we really want people to get their addictions under control, but we want them to grow in Christ. That's our main objective, is the growth aspect and the discipleship. And what's funny is you'll have guys that come in, for the first week or month or even 2 months, they talk about, man, I'm so happy I didn't do drugs today, and that's outstanding, and we love that. But all of a sudden it's, man, God is really working on me about this, or man, I'm trying to grow in this area, and before they know it, they haven't even talked about drugs for 3 months.
Yeah.
And we don't want drugs and alcohol and these addictions to dominate our speech, to dominate our talk, and dominate our minds. We want Jesus to do that, and that will happen. If you just follow what the Holy Spirit is leading you to do in the group, the Holy Spirit will take care of that. I can guarantee it.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you're saying really the champion needs to have the ability to draw people into the group via their addictions, but then to be able to disciple them into maturity in Christ.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So those are great profile attributes. So if you're watching this video, just ask yourself, do I fit the profile? Or what can I do to maybe there's someone who will watch this and they'll go, you know what, my walk with the Lord, it's kind of been on the shelf. I need to get that down and really work on that so that I can have some deep roots so that then I can bear the weight of the ministry that God could give me through this network. So, that's a great call. Also, you mentioned in a previous module about compassion, that's the number one attribute, that if you want to be a champion, you have to be compassionate with people and by meeting them where they are. And you talked about the woman at the well. Talk to me. Let's wrap up on that note of compassion, since you said that is the most important one.
Yeah, well, it is, because if you're in a position to where you're a champion, that chances are somebody showed you compassion in the past for you to be able to get to be where you're at. And that's what a lot of these people are looking for somebody to understand them and to be compassionate towards them. And we're commanded to do that. Jesus tells us to love our neighbors, and that goes along with being compassionate. Because oftentimes, we're in a position to where we can relate with what's going on in their lives. And I'm so thankful that I went through what I did to be able to relate to these people. And I wouldn't change it. I really wouldn't. If I was able to go back and God told me you can not go through all of that and still, be a good person or whatever, I would say no. But if he told me you had to go through that again 7 times over for me to give you what you have now, I'd do it again. Because it allows me to have compassion for these people that are coming into the group, and to really be in tune with their emotions and their feelings. Because, like I've said before, being sober and walking with Christ as a former addict is so much more than just not doing drugs anymore or not watching pornography anymore. Man, you really have to unload a lot of those things that are just weighing down on your chest. You just have to get rid of those things. And so oftentimes, that takes somebody to draw those things out of you. I know in my life when I was finding recovery, and there were just certain things that I refused to address in my own life. And it really took somebody else to look from the outside and have compassion on me to help me draw those things out for me to address those. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know if it would have ever happened. So it's really up to the champion and also the other members of the group to be compassionate toward everybody else, to be able to get those things out and to really start finding some healing.
That's so good. So to just bring this full circle, it's really interesting. At the beginning of this interview, you were talking about the fact that there was a point in your life where you really didn't care about anybody. You hated people. And then God has changed you and really given you that compassion through what you went through. And so you combine that compassion with the discipline that's displayed on the wall behind you, that's a reflection of what God's done in your life. And it's just a beautiful story and an inspiration to anyone who wants to be a champion, that God can use all of the bad things in your life to actually help you help somebody else by understanding where they are. So thank you for your service to our country and for talking about the profile of a champion.
Great. Thank you, Rosina. I appreciate it.